Good morning, Venters. I hope you guys are having a wonderful Wednesday. Happy hump day to you. It's Tuesday for me. We got through the first couple days of this week successfully, like always, right? Guys, I'm a little bit worried because obviously you're going to be hearing about the aftermath of Hurricane Milton today, but I'm watching it right now as I guess it's getting ready to hit in the western portion of Florida. And I saw a video today that was really freaky. They were showing this neighborhood in West Florida where they had a bunch of debris out along the streets. And this was debris that they had set outside after that last hurricane they had just kind of experienced, right? And now you have Hurricane Milton, which I guess, from what I understand, is one of the top 5 or 10 hurricanes in power that they've ever measured before. And apparently it just got downgraded to a Category 4 storm, but it apparently has winds that are up there like pushing 150 miles per hour, and they're expecting the storm surge and waves and stuff to be up there in the double-digit foot area, so like 10 to 15 feet, sometimes higher. And it's just like, what a nightmare. You have all these homes that have all this debris outside, and now you're going to be adding more water and stuff. So they have mandatory evacuations set up throughout the whole western portion of that state. And wow, what a scary situation. That is kind of horrific. If anybody out there is a Floridian and you're in this part of the state that needs to be evacuated, wow, get out of there while you can. That does not look like a very fun situation at all. And it seems like we were just recovering from one storm and now we're ready for another. So the one advantage that Floridians have is that they've been dealing with hurricane weather for forever, right? So hopefully they're smart enough to heed the warnings of Governor DeSantis, and hopefully they get the heck out of there. You know, here in Arizona, it's horrible flood if we get, a couple hours worth of rain. But, I've never heard of anything where you're going to be up there at 15 or 20 feet of storm surge. That just sounds very scary. They showed a gentleman for the news, and he was against somebody's garage door, and the garage door had like a line of where the previous storm had gone up, and it was about 3 or 4 feet. It was about up to his waist. And he goes, this one we're assuming is going to be up here, and he pointed up towards the second story window of this home above the garage door. And I just thought, God, that sounds really scary. I guess the main thing is that they were trying to tell people is that you don't want to be stubborn. This is not the time to be a donkey. You need to get out, because what happens is people think, oh, I can just wait till it gets real bad, and worst case scenario, I'll hop into my car, and I'll get going. But the reality is, they were saying, is that when people do that, they don't give credence to how big the storm is, and you're literally driving into areas that you'll never make it to. Guys, I heard something that might actually be more scary than the Florida news. I was having a chat with my good buddy ChatGPT yesterday, and I asked him, I said, hey, what state has the highest life expectancy? And what state out of the 50 states has the lowest life expectancy? And ChatGPT told me something that kind of blew me away. The average person in Mississippi lives to be 71 years old, 71.8 years. The average person in Hawaii lives to be 81 and a half years. Guys, that's a 10-year difference within the same country. And something seems really horrible about that. The idea that people in one particular state are literally going to outlive the people in another state on average by a decade. Something's wrong with that. The average woman in Hawaii weighs about 140 to 150 pounds, and the average woman in Mississippi weighs closer to 170 pounds. Is that crazy? The average man in Hawaii weighs about 185 pounds. The average man in Mississippi weighs about 205 pounds. How the heck do we have certain states that are just so below the curve, like Mississippi, and then we have states like Hawaii, where obviously Hawaii is the #1 state in life expectancy? So you start thinking about the two states and you start thinking, well, one state is famous for having beautiful, serene beaches and probably pretty good air quality, that being Hawaii, right? And then other states are known for having poverty beyond belief, poor eating habits, right? Lack of socioeconomical situations, right? So really poor neighborhoods. And pretty soon you have a perfect recipe for why certain people are able to live longer than others. And I used to watch this show called Dog Chapman, the Bounty Hunter. You guys remember that show? And he would go into neighborhoods in Hawaii where they were afflicted with meth addictions. And he would show some pretty desolate areas. So I know that both states have their impoverished areas and the areas where they're struggling with drug addictions and stuff. But if you would have told me that there's one state in the US where people are literally living on average a full decade longer than another state, I wouldn't have believed you. Now, if you would have told me people in Hawaii live 3 years longer on average than people in Mississippi, that's something I could have accepted. But 10 years, I don't know if you guys agree, but that seems unacceptable. So to the people of Mississippi, you probably don't have to worry too much about perishing from the upcoming hurricanes, right? You probably have more to worry about when it comes to the way you're living your everyday lives. If you're in Mississippi, I would give you a prescription for a daily walk immediately. And I feel like if we could get everybody in the state of Mississippi to walk, to drink some more water, to avoid the sugar and processed foods and processed sugars, I think we could change those numbers pretty quickly. We got to start talking these kids into starting a walking routine. I don't know about you, but the whole idea that people in that state are dying so much faster than all the other states in the country just seems really, really freaky to me. You always wonder whenever you hear stats like the one that I just told you, you always have to wonder, is that for people that are native Mississippians and native Hawaiians? Is that a situation where people that live there their whole life, that's the average life expectancy? Or, in theory, could a person from Mississippi try to eat well, move to Hawaii, take advantage of the scenery and fresh air and way of living, and could they too extend their life by a decade? That's what I'd like to know. Is it one of those things where if you live in Mississippi 65 years of your life and then you move to Hawaii, it's too late? You still only have 5 or 6 years left? Or can you extend your life and get it way above 70? I know one thing. If somebody died at the age of 70, I would consider them to be somebody that passed away far too early. Now, I know there's people out there saying, no, Jesse, 70 is a pretty decent lifespan. And yeah, I agree. In the year 1900, 70 would have been a heck of a lifespan, right? But in the year 2024 of our Lord, we'd like to think that we can live a little bit longer than 70. 70 really bothers me when I consider the idea that my mom is close to that age, basically. She's going to be 69 here in November. And then on top of being 69 in November, she weighs close to 300 pounds. Her doctor had a talk with her a couple weeks back about eliminating processed sugars and going on a diet. And my mother is one of these folks that basically, she looks for loopholes. She doesn't necessarily want to listen to the advice of her doctor. And, it's one of those things where you can tell people till you're blue in the face, you need to take what your doctor said seriously, but you can't babysit their mouths. You can't sit there and watch every portion of food that goes in their gut. And so I'm a little bit worried about that. But you want to know something? My mom signifies one of millions of people that are told every year that they better change their ways, otherwise they're going to wish they had. And for whatever reason, some people just don't. I remember when I was young, you would hear stories of doctors warning patients, hey, you got to slow down on the bacon and eggs. You got to look for more positive, more good alternatives to breakfast, like, maybe a bowl of oatmeal and stuff, right? And I can remember when I was young, you would hear the stories of housewives saying, yeah, my husband was just stubborn. He never wanted to give up his eggs and bacon. Henry's no longer with us, God rest his soul. And that's the way it was. People have been choosing to ignore their doctor's warnings for millennium. So here's my $1 million question for you. Are you going to wait until your doctor tells you the worst news ever, that you have to quit bacon and eggs? Or are you willing to start a walking program, willing to start ditching the soda for water, willing to start ditching the cinnamon rolls for, a better alternative? And are you willing to change your life so the next time you visit your doctor, you can get a good, clean bill of health? If you're listening to this channel, there's at least a piece of you that wants to try to be healthier, that wants to try to make the healthy decision. Okay, well, how do we do that? Do we want to jump into this cold swimming pool of like eating better, right? So it's a shock to our system? Or do we want to take baby steps into the heated side of the pool, right? That's what it equates to. Do you want to be that person that jumps into the ice cold pool and just gets used to swimming? Or do you want to be that person that just kind of baby steps in on the side that's heated? I think we should try to baby step in on the side that's heated. So how do we do that? Well, with baby steps, what we would slowly but surely do is we would start a walking routine. It's as easy as walking for 10 or 15 minutes in the morning. Hey, not to interrupt what I'm saying, but once again, I showed you guys this the other day. You got this house that has all this stuff outside, and it's literally just waiting for the trash pickup. I don't even know if the trash pickup does all that junk. But that's the type of stuff that's outside of homes in Florida. And these homes are going to be having this storm surge up, and there's already debris in the streets. So imagine you have this lake that starts forming in your front and backyard. And in the front yard, there's already all this debris in the neighborhood. That's going to equate to little knives and swords that are basically in the water. And if you're all of a sudden in that water, right? Because, they show flood victims and they're always in the water. You could get injured really severely just from the debris that's already out there. So again, this is kind of a different storm than we've ever experienced, from the standpoint of a lot of these people are literally just recovering from the previous storm system. So again, get out of Florida while you still can. Escape from Florida. It's such a beautiful time of the year. This is the time of the year where I'm actually my happiest. And it might be that same way for you. We had a summer where even yesterday, believe it or not, it got up to 110 degrees. And it's really weird. I've never been one of these guys that's really big into the whole climate change situation. And, but man, all these storms, all this never-ending heat. Right now, I'm used to this time of the year being where the mornings get chilly. But man, it still feels pretty warm in the morning. Now, it feels nice and comfortable, but it really should be about 8 to 10 degrees cooler than it has been. So even though I'm in a t-shirt, this is normally the time of year where you would see people in the morning, at least, start to bust out the windbreakers. But not this year. Definitely not this year. Now, am I still going to be one of these people that says, hey, let's all turn in our cars and stuff? Here's the problem with that. even if every one of us in America gave up our gas cars, right? I don't necessarily know if the answer is battery-powered cars, because all that takes a lot of coal production. And oh yeah, speaking of coal production, here's the asterisk in the whole thing. Even if everybody in America decided that, hey, we're going to go the route of Jesse and we're going to start walking everywhere, you still have these countries like India and China that are getting progressively dirtier and dirtier. So I don't really know how one country making the sacrifice of their cars and their way of living, while other countries go into overdrive and make things worse, I don't really know how that's an answer. You know, it's kind of akin to, imagine you're trying to clean up your house, and meanwhile your neighbor has grass that's growing up to 5 or 6 feet in the air right next to you. And pretty soon that grass starts to grow into your home, into your front yard. Yeah, you could cut their grass, but you can't go on their property and cut their grass, right? You can cut it off of your property, but what's that going to do in the grand scheme? You're still going to live in a neighborhood that looks cruddy because your neighbors aren't changing their ways. And we don't have any jurisdiction over China. You know, you never hear anything where, oh, the US has laid down the law and China's going to change their ways. You never hear about that. And I'm telling you, I think the electric car situation, I think that's a real scam as well, because guess what happens to those batteries when salt water hits them? They end up becoming fire hazards. Something in the salt water gets those batteries to start to catch fire and stuff, which is really weird, isn't it? It's just kind of weird. I remember when I was younger, they showed some sort of chemical. It was like a white mound of powder, and they added water to it, and they go, would you ever think that adding water to something would cause a fire? And they added water to this like mound of powder, and it literally set ablaze on fire. And I was like 15 years old when I saw this, and I was like, wow, that's really something, right? But the reality is that's what happens with these batteries when they get infiltrated with salt water. So if you have an electric car and that battery gets breached by the salt water from the storm surge, that could end up becoming a fire hazard. And then imagine in the future, everybody's got electric cars, right? And they're all plugging in their vehicles at the end of the night. And imagine you have a hurricane situation where everybody needs to evacuate. Well, what are they going to do before they evacuate? They're all going to charge up their cars, and there's not going to be enough electricity to charge up everybody's vehicle. And then everybody gets 200 or 300 miles out of a full charge, and that's if they have a good brand newish battery. If your battery is an older battery, it might not even be able to take a full charge anymore. Could you imagine trying to get out of a state and you're driving hundreds of miles and you're hoping to find a charging station? And oh, by the way, every charging station you find has 100 cars deep in it. You're never gonna find me agreeing to a world where we have nothing but electric vehicles. And by the way, it seems like every other week we're hearing some expert that says, yeah, I don't really think that's the way to go. Yet it looks like we're being forced down that path either way. For some reason, we just view fossil fuels as the absolute worst thing ever, when the reality is we would never be where we are without those fossil fuels. My thinking is, do we have the brain power to make the fossil fuels a little bit more cleaner? Do we have the brain power to make these vehicles go further? When I was first getting into buying cars back in the 90s, I remember that we had government standards where they were saying stuff along the lines of, hey, the average car gets about 20 miles to the gallon now. The car manufacturers are giving commands where they have to be to the point where by the year 2020, they have to be able to get 35 or 40 miles to the gallon, right? We were trying to make things more economical. We were trying to make cars where they went further on a drop or two of gas than they were capable of before. But I don't hear those things anymore, do you guys? Do you guys remember that talk back in the 90s and early 2000s of how, hey, these cars based on California standards need to be to the point where they can get 40 miles to the gallon, by the time 2010 rolls around? We used to hear these goals and numbers, and even these goals and numbers seemed a little like, God, is that even possible? But the car manufacturers tried doing it. And then I don't know if you guys remember, but a handful of years ago, Toyota got in trouble because some way, somehow, when cars were going through emissions, their system knew how to trick it so it would look like they were having lower emissions than they were. I think when you go in to get your emissions done, they will put it on a rack and they'll make the tires spin up to 40 miles per hour. And they'll have the tires spinning like that for, I think, 45 seconds or a minute straight. And then they read the emissions. And I think Toyota had rigged it up where every time their vehicles went 40 miles per hour, it actually lowered their emissions. Do you guys remember that scam that Toyota got in trouble for? And I think Toyota ended up being fined just a boatload of money. It's funny, some people hear that and they say that is horrible. They should fine Toyota so much money, and they did end up finding them quite a bit of money. But what's interesting is I look at that and I say, hey, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. I remember when I heard that Toyota had done that, it kind of made me laugh, because I was just thinking that's how difficult these standards are. Our government says, hey, this is the new standard. This is what we're going to achieve. You need to hit it by such and such a year. And they just make it a pain in the ass for everybody. I think the way we could change the world is if we could get a situation where we could talk more people into riding a bike, if we could talk more people into taking a walk, if we could get it and make it more easy to use public transportation. But let me tell you the reason that you probably don't bother with public transportation. Every time you go on a bus, you're forced to sit with somebody that hasn't showered in a week. You're forced to sit with people that look like they're about ready to pull a gun and stuff. Oh, Jesse, this sounds like one of those conversations where you're not Mr. Nice. No, it's just one of those things where go on your city bus, especially if it's not in the suburbs. Go on the city bus in the inner city and ask yourself, is this someplace where I feel safe? I don't want to clean the environment at the detriment of my health. Well, if you clean the environment, you'll be healthier. No, if you clean the environment and you have to, surround yourself with suspect characters to do it, I can see how people are choosing not to go that route. I'm telling you, I took the bus for a whole year and a half about 7 or 8 years ago. And I had a car, but I still took the bus because it was a straight shot to my work. And in this 2.5, 3 mile bus ride, right? That's the shortest bus ride ever, right? A couple minutes. Man, I would see the nastiest, gnarliest characters. You would hear people say stories of how they got bed bugs from a bus seat. I don't know about you, but man, you don't want to mess with that type of stuff, So again, am I against taking the bus or am I against taking the electric tram? No, that stuff is enjoyable. Take it all you want. But if you're one of these folks that every time you get on a bus, you have a horrible nightmarish situation where you feel like all you want to do is take a shower and shower off the grossness off of you, I don't blame you for not wanting to get on the bus. And if every electric vehicle is a pain in the ass, I don't blame you for not wanting to get an electric vehicle. I think the better answer, instead of getting the whole world to change, is for people in Florida to come to the reality that you live in a state that is supposed to, in the next 50 to 100,000 years, is supposed to ultimately go underwater, right? You ever see those maps of what the U.S. is supposed to look like in a couple hundred years? Like Florida doesn't even exist, right? It's like, why don't we do the reality of getting those people to sell their homes back to the government, right? Make them a naval base of some sort and let them move into the interior of the country. If the climate is going to change anyway, and by the way, a lot of experts are saying that it's going down a path over the next 30 to 50 years that we're not going to be able to stop no matter what we do. Okay, well, what's that mean? It means that these storms are going to happen with more and more regularity. Well, move out of the storm areas. That's the real game plan. Instead of making everybody in the world change everything they do, why don't we make the people that are affected change the plan? Move out of Florida, move to Ohio. It's such a big country. When you fly over it, you see nothing but empty space everywhere. Have you ever taken a flight and looked out the window? It's all empty space. They tell us that, hey, we've got too many people. And it's real easy to believe that, yeah, there's too many people. Go on a flight, look out the window. Nothing but empty space everywhere you go. So I don't think there's too many people. I think we have too many people that are too nearsighted. Yes, the climate's changing. No, there's nothing we can do about it. You could get rid of everybody's car and make them walk, and we're still going to have countries like China and India that are going to still push us over the tipping point. So it seems to me like the logical answer would be, let's urge people to move out of Florida, move into the interior. It's just how it's going to be. There's nothing we're going to do today that's going to save your Florida home tomorrow, right? It's just reality. Now, if you live in Florida, I'm sorry if I make you feel like you have to move, but it's time to move. And speaking of time to move, it's time for you to contemplate taking an extra credit walk. Remember, we're not here to talk about hurricanes. We're here to talk about your weight. And you might be on a trajectory to only live to be 70 like these poor folks in Mississippi. What you need to do is you need to decide that you're going to live like a Hawaiian. You're going to get outside and you're going to breathe fresh air. You're going to start drinking water. You're going to start eating more fruits and vegetables. And you're going to start looking forward to living longer. And we'll see you tomorrow.